Welcome. Good evening, good morning, or good afternoon, depending on what part of the world you're in right now. Thank you for joining us in this conversation with Jason Hahn of Activision Blizzard. Our topic is the video gaming business and the future of esports. Today's program is sponsored by the School of Information with support from the William Warner Bishop Lectureship Fund and the Martha Boaz Lectureship Fund. This event is presented in partnership with the School of Kinesiology. I'm Barry Fishman. I'm a professor in the School of Information and the School of Education. I study video games as models for high-performance learning environments. I teach courses about games and learning, and I'm the faculty lead of the GreatCraft project, which helps instructors reimagine their courses through the lens of well-designed games. And I'm very pleased to introduce you to Jason Hahn. Jason is the head of strategic initiatives for Activision Blizzard's Esports division. Activision Blizzard is a leading gaming company that owns and operates the Call of Duty League, the Overwatch League, and other esports programs. Jason manages strategy, planning, business development, and analytics for the esports division, where he works to build growth strategies and execute new business opportunities in the world of esports. He has led over $800 million of esports team sales transactions, bringing new franchise groups from cities around the world into the world of esports through Activision's leagues. Prior to this role, Jason was in the corporate strategy and M&A group at Activision Blizzard, where he led the acquisition of King Digital, the makers of Candy Crush, and Major League Gaming. He also built the business plans for several new operating divisions. Prior to joining Activision Blizzard in 2014, Jason was the vice president at JP Morgan in their entertainment industries group in Los Angeles. And as you can tell from his jacket, Jason is a proud Wolverine holding a BBA from the University of Michigan's Ross School of Business. So for the next hour, we're going to talk about the growing world of esports, including the role of higher education in this world, both in terms of our role in competition and the broader scholarly activities of the research university. And as we progress through our conversation, I invite you to please add your questions into the chat so we can work them into our conversation, and we'll also take some time at the end to answer questions. Jason, thanks again for joining us.
It's a pleasure to be here, and I bleed maize and blue, so I'm always honored to come back to campus, even though it has to be virtual this year, to support the students on campus and provide as much information as I can to enlighten everyone here.
Fantastic. And to get things started, I'd love for you to give us a brief introduction to esports. I imagine there's a wide range of experience with this subject among those watching, everyone from active competitors to maybe even a couple of noobs in the crowd.
Sure. So esports is essentially competitive organized video gaming competitions, really between professional players and teams. It's very confusing in that what esports is not is the streamers who are on Twitch, in their bedrooms necessarily streaming to audiences and fans. We don't necessarily view that as esports. It is an incredibly important and growing part of the industry, but we view esports as that kind of top of the pyramid where the best players and the best teams in the world are playing in organized competitions.
So really a team activity.
Yeah, and the best esports are the team-based multiplayer esports, that really require coordination with the various players on the team who have different roles and responsibilities, not dissimilar to traditional sports where you might have the quarterback and the wide receiver and they are each playing a role as you progress. It's what makes sports so exciting and so great is that the different roles and responsibilities, and it's no different in esports, especially the multiplayer team-based esports.
Did you have a short video you wanted to share with us to help sort of set the stage for what some of this looks like?
Yeah, I did. So just to start, so I work at Activision Blizzard. One of the leagues that we own and operate is called the Overwatch League. We recently completed our 3rd season. We had an amazing grand finals, and we had a little hype video before that grand finals that I thought would be interesting just to give people a glimpse into the world of esports, even though it's just a small glimpse.
They say, don't dwell on the past. They say, stay in the present. What they don't know is that champions aren't capable of thinking that way. When greatness is ahead of you, there can only be one direction on your mind. The path here wasn't always smooth, but looking back isn't an option anymore. All that matters right here, right now, is how history will look back on you. How will you champion the future? Will it be indisputable? A dynasty realized? Retribution? Or redemption? The time for heroes is here. And there's no better moment to show who you will become. To champion the future. Your journey begins now.
Jason, can you give us some idea of kind of the timeline of esports? How long has it been around? How did it grow up? And especially how's Activision Blizzard played a role in that?
Yeah, sure. So organized competition around esports has been a long part of video game culture. But for the longest time, it was really unstructured and was largely between amateurs. And really the industry started taking off in South Korea in the late 90s, which is, we view South Korea as kind of the birthplace of esports. And became very popular through a real-time strategy game called StarCraft, which is a game that Activision Blizzard owns. And so but for a long time, it was very, what I call grassroots, very unstructured. It was a little bit of like the Wild Wild West, where you had players and teams and organizers all trying to create competition based on the games. Really over the last 5 years is where the popularity all over the world started to surge. And that's when the industry started really taking a lot more of a structured approach. And that's where Activision Blizzard came in. As we started looking at the industry in this kind of Wild Wild West form, we kind of realized that it was unorganized. There weren't official leagues. There weren't players that can make a living. There weren't great revenue streams. And so we said, there's a real opportunity for us at Activision Blizzard to study how traditional sports works, study how sporting ecosystems are structured to create value for everybody, whether it's players, fans, sponsors, media partners. And there's a blueprint out there that already exists, and we should be learning from that to create perhaps a new way of doing esports. And so that's what we've been spending really the last 5 years as a company investing in, is building a new ecosystem around esports. Because when you have sponsors and media partners promoting it, and you have an ecosystem of team owners that are building esports events in their cities, that's when you really start creating value for fans and players.
How does the world of professional esports and the world of the emerging world of collegiate esports interact?
Yeah, so right now they're very separate. What's happening on college campuses is very grassroots and organic. And typically, we have a separate, what I call amateur circuit, which we call Path to Pro, which, is run by the publishers, which kind of finds talents that are very good at the games, and they have the chance to potentially be professionals and make it to the pro leagues. College esports, I'd say is kind of, to date at least, more of a club-based, student-based sport for people that are very interested in esports and gaming to get involved in the student community and get involved in esports in a deeper way. We're hopeful over time that could potentially change, and colleges can play a more meaningful role in the development of the esports ecosystem and create a standalone structure that perhaps could work in an ecosystem around college esports that we're very excited about in years to come.
So just to clarify, so the professional leagues are they organized by Activision Blizzard and other gaming companies?
For the most part, the professional leagues are run, operated, and organized by the main game publishers who actually own the games. In certain cases, certain game publishers take a different approach, and they outsource those activities to third-party tournament organizers who then, on behalf of those publishers, will organize competitions and create content. Oftentimes, that's due to internal capabilities. Oftentimes, different gaming companies have different views towards esports. Some of them view it as a thing they want to own and control, and as a way to kind of drive value to those companies. Some of them view it more as a way to just get people to play more of the game, and so they want as many people organizing competitions all over the world as possible. So it's a little bit different based on each kind of publisher's approach in esports and what their strategic intent around esports is.
And are at the collegiate level, since it's more grassroots, are the publishers trying to help coordinate that activity or get involved with that activity? What's the status of that?
Yes, for sure. So, I think obviously we own the games. And so in order for the colleges to be able to make esports available, we play a meaningful role in kind of allowing that activity to happen and making sure it happens in a good way. And I think there's a lot of third-party companies out there that have expertise and have infrastructure in esports tournament organizers. And, a lot of them are cropping up all over the place to try to kind of be the winner in the collegiate esports space. We're talking to all of those companies and trying to get a sense on who would be the best kind of steward for our IP on college campuses to perhaps make college esports into a bigger undertaking over time.
That leads me to a topic that I wanted to get into with you around the relationship between esports and other athletic activities on campus. So, most people involved in this conversation are probably aware of the NCAA in maintaining amateurism in sports, and esports at Michigan, at least, is a recreational sport level. It's a club, not part of the athletic department. But what role do you see in the future for organizations like the NCAA or other official athletic department led activities for esports?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'm not claiming to be the world's expert here, but my understanding is the NCAA is really a governing body. They set the rules, the requirements, they organize competitions, and then they sell the rights to those competitions. So, effectively, you don't need the NCAA to build a successful collegiate esports program. In fact, the NCAA is kind of held back and burdened in some ways by 100 years of principles and the ways of doing things, like you mentioned, around amateurism, not allowing players to monetize their names and their likenesses. And so there could be an opportunity for someone almost to right the wrongs of the NCAA and to not necessarily be kind of have to adhere to all the structure that the NCAA has already built, and can perhaps create a new way of doing collegiate athletics with esports as an example, that provides a lot more opportunity for student athletes.
You mentioned monetize. I'm aware there's often opportunities for prize money in the competitions, and that's also true at the collegiate level, I believe. Is that the kind of thing you're thinking about that would be different from the way the NCAA oversees things?
I'm not sure necessarily about prize money and the role of that. It could perhaps be one of the levers or one of the areas of monetization. But I think it's just more flexibility for student athletes. A lot of popular esports players also stream on platforms like Twitch and YouTube, and they get sponsors. They can get donations from their fans. And if, those esports athletes were part of the NCAA, perhaps that those activities based on the rules that exist under the NCAA today, perhaps those things wouldn't be allowed, or they would have to be, significantly limited. And so perhaps there's an opportunity where there's just more flexibility for esports athletes to have a presence, online while still being a student and still being an esports player for their university.
Have you seen efforts at Michigan or elsewhere for esports clubs, esports athletes, and organizations to try to get the kind of recognition and support from the university that other sports might get?
We still have a long way to go. Still have a long way to go there. I think there's a bunch of universities that are certainly investing and leaning into esports. They see it as a huge opportunity, and I think they view esports athletes, and which they should be viewed as the same as any other athlete on campus, where there's scholarships being provided, there's practice facilities that are made available, there's all the support around helping those students balance their academic and their sporting lives on campus. And that's how it should be. And that's what we need to see in order for esports to be successful and for us to get behind it. We need to see universities that want to provide that support, that infrastructure, and the funds to allow esports to thrive on those campuses.
How do you think fans and players alike should think about the difference between the collegiate level of participation and the pro levels? Do we see players going back and forth between the two levels, or do people tend to pick a lane and stay in it?
Well, I think there's a difference between, I guess, and where my mind was going was on the fan perspective. Like, what's the difference between a college esport and a regular esport? And really, it's no different than basketball or something like that, where you have the college team and you might be a Michigan fan and you might be a Laker fan and you love the sport of basketball. And so you might love the sport of Overwatch and you love Michigan Overwatch and you love the LA Valiant who play in the Overwatch League, and there might not be a difference. We are thinking about, is there a way to though we do have the opportunity, because the industry is so young, maybe you differentiate the product a little bit for the college setting. Like, you make the game length shorter, you do a different mode of the game. And there's some games that we make that have different competitive modes, and perhaps the college mode's a little bit different, just to allow the fan to have a different experience across the two. When it comes to the pro side, it's a little bit interesting in that, the esports athletes are in their prime at very young ages. And even the pros are sometimes retiring at age 25, 26. And then they might go back to get their college degree after, and could be a college esports athlete perhaps after they've already been a pro. So it might actually be very different in the way that it evolves as traditional sports. There's still a lot to see how it all plays out, but because of the young age of esports athletes and pro esports athletes, it's not necessarily that they're going to have a long 15-year career after college in esports. And so the cadence and the timing is something to think about as the industry evolves and as college esports becomes a thing. It might be where they go and after they're done with their career, and so, which is an interesting thing to think about.
Really, I hadn't even really thought about people aging out of esports. I mean, I think of, like, the basketball player whose knees finally go. What causes people to stop playing esports?
Yeah, well, first off, it's the time commitment, the amount of practice required, the level of intensity of competition is no different. In fact, it could be even more intense than traditional sports. And so I think there is that factor, of burnout, if you will, for these professional athletes, but also they're in their prime. They're the best when younger, sharper minds, better hand-eye coordination. And I'm not the science expert on this, but I think there have been studies that show, that prove out, like, there's a certain ceiling for age for what makes probably somebody the best in the world at video gaming. And that there's a sweet spot within the younger age bracket there that where the players are the best at younger ages. There's obviously always going to be outliers to that, and the older athlete who's able to, and those are the storylines that obviously us as a business that's trying to create the stories and and make this into a media property in addition to just the competition side. Those are the things that we love. Like,
there was a comment in the comment stream about collegiate teams maybe becoming where players go when they retire. So kind of flipping the pro to collegiate circuit around, which is an interesting idea.
Yeah,
as you see this industry sort of evolving and maturing, do you think there'll ever be a point in time when the leagues and tournaments are separated from the publishers, or do you think the publishers will always play a key role in organizing things?
Yeah, I think the publishers will always play a key role. It's very linked. The way that esports worked is very linked to the way the game is made and the way the game is promoted. And so there always needs to be a level of linkage between the developer and the publisher of a game and the esport. And in fact, one could argue that we haven't done the best job as an industry of making games that are built for esports and creating a game from scratch that is designed to be viewed, that is designed to be entertaining, that is designed to be competitive, by nature. A lot of the games that we have esports for today while they are all those things, they were made for someone to be fun to play, not necessarily be fun to watch. And so I think the challenge our industry has is to continue to figure out how to make this content the most entertaining to watch. And of course, we're making a lot of progress there. And even with games that you're starting to invest in more development talent that is focused specifically as part of the game developer teams that are focused specifically on esports and the viewership experience of esports and all of that. And I think we're going to continue to make strides in that direction. But that's precisely why you kind of need to have it kind of linked. It doesn't mean that publishers won't necessarily outsource some of the blocking and tackling, the organization of competition, and license out some of the rights to third parties who are very good at organizing competitions, producing broadcasting, things like that. It doesn't mean that there's not a role for third-party companies in this, but to make it completely separate is a tough thing, I think, to do.
You alluded there to the influence that competition might have on game design. We actually had a direct question about that from the chat, in particular about Overwatch League, and whether there has already been any influence of competition on the further development of the games.
Yeah, so I think that the teams that are developing Overwatch and the esports teams are talking every day about things to fine tune in the game to make it and some innovations around kind of the spectator experience. And so yes, there is some of that's happening, as well as different modes of the game that could perhaps be more competitive as we continue to build out the Overwatch franchise, and as sequels come out, and as things like that happen. I think you'll even start to see more of that, some of the esports kind of design decisions kind of helping inform some of the game development.
Nice. Let's talk a little bit about some of the different roles that are involved here, because I think we've been talking a lot about competition and competitors, but what are some of the other roles behind the scenes, either on campuses or on teams and at the company, that our students may be thinking about getting into as they're developing their careers?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, as esports starts growing, just like any other industry, and it's now almost $1 billion industry, there's many ways to get involved and have a career in esports, whether that's, marketing, finance, broadcasting, media, research and development, data science. Esports needs all that kind of talent in order to create a successful commercial opportunity over time. And so I think there's plenty of opportunity for roles in esports out, because not everybody's going to be able to be, the best player in the world and become a pro. And some people that are very, technical with the game can also be, general managers or coaches as well. Because, these teams, just like traditional sports, people who understand the game really well and where the talent is and scouting for that talent. All those types of traditional sporting roles exist in esports, and we're going to need to continue to kind of invest in talent in those areas.
We actually have a conversation started on this campus, and I know at some other campuses too, it's going on, about ways to get other academic areas involved too. And you mentioned data analytics, and Dean Tom Finholt in the Information School teaches a course on sports analytics, and certainly this would be well within that realm. And especially with esports, where the kind of data that's generated is immense and built into the environment. We're working overtime to sort of wire up traditional sports, but here it's already wired. Also thinking about user interface design, user experience design, and kinesiology, thinking about sports medicine, physiology, training. Those are things that feel very special for esports. Are you seeing at Michigan or elsewhere specialists developing that are tailored towards esports athletes?
Yeah, for sure. And those are all great points too. I think the sports medicine is an incredible field, and esports needs a lot of that. Like I said, the intensity of an esports athlete is sometimes underestimated, and looking at the data and how it affects, we still don't know what we don't know about this space and how the toll that can take on an athlete. And so we need, best in the world people who are trained to understand these types of dynamics that can help the industry grow and potentially foresee problems that we don't see down the road. And so those are great points.
I like to think we could build a whole ecosystem within the university of athletes and people that study the athletes and people that study and develop the industry and people that are learning how to build the games and so forth. Let's move into a couple of related issues, and then we are going to get to people's questions. So folks, if you have questions, let me encourage you to put them into the chat on YouTube so we can organize those and get to those. But a big issue in the game industry is equity, gender equity and representation. And there's been some fairly nasty scandals and dust-ups over the years around gender balance in particular. So I'm curious about your thoughts and Activision Blizzard's thoughts about gender representation in esports and what kinds of work is going on within the industry to try to boost participation and equity.
I'm glad you asked that. It's a very important issue and one that we take very seriously. I think we need to see more equity, inclusion, diversity in the world of gaming in general. And then I think that trickles down into esports. There was a lot of investment and efforts happening at Activision Blizzard to double down on that and make sure that we are doing the right things to encourage women both to have careers at our company in the right way, as well as, in the world of esports. So, it starts with listening, and then we have to act. We have to learn, and it's not enough just to listen. We have to really understand the issues and then start acting to do things to change the course there. The good news is I think we're starting to see some positive developments, particularly around esports. I think one of our partners, Cloud9, just recently announced an all-women roster for this new game, Valorant, which was great to see in the market. I just saw that press release the other day, and it was music to my ears. And another esports organization, Gen G, recently did the same thing. And so we're starting to see, I think esports is the one place where there is opportunity, since it's such a young industry, to do things differently. There could be an all-women team, perhaps, in one of our professional leagues. Women can be part of our. It's not the men's league. It could potentially be. You can have women and men on the same team, and same with as the universities think about esports and developing esports programs. I think the same is true there, and it could start at the university level where we see males and females part of the varsity programs of these esports.
Are you seeing any universities using esports as a recruiting tool yet, as a way to reach out to women and other minorities to participate on the grounds of their interest in esports?
I think that the couple universities that have leaned in the heaviest to esports are doing things like that, from what I can tell.
Who are the leaders, by the way, in this space? I'm aware that Michigan, we have our club and we're excited about it, but I'm not sure we're in the lead in this space at the moment. Who are you seeing as the places to look to?
Yeah, I mean, there are a couple universities out there that I think are leaning in more than others. I think it starts with a lot of what I call the technical universities out there that have the really focused on like the STEM programs and that are starting with the ground up of building it into an academic to build a whole curriculum, minors and majors around esports at the academic level, and then they're using the kind of sporting part of it to help. To get people excited about the academic part. So it's a lot of what I call the technical universities out there that are focused on math and science, just given the overlap to gaming and.
So the kinds of places that might have had a game development program already. Yeah,
exactly.
And that, in fact, there was a question in the chat about whether there's room for an esports major. And I think you just answered that question. Yes, there are such things as esports majors in the world. And thinking about where they would fit in within the University of Michigan is another question, but I think there's lots of different potential places for sure. Somebody also has a question here related to careers and career paths about the kinds of opportunities that aspiring data scientists might look forward to in the near future. And I imagine that would be the kind of role within Activision Blizzard where you probably hire a lot of data scientists. What kinds of roles within the organization do you see those folks?
Yeah. So one of my responsibilities is I manage our analytics business for esports, which is really monitoring all of our business performance,
Hmm.
and all of the data that comes out of our streams, how many viewers, all the viewership data, all the other data, which requires a lot of times, understanding the lifetime value of our viewer, things like that. And so there's the business application of data science for sure, that will exist in esports and already does. And I think we need more of that in esports. In gaming more broadly, it's one of the biggest areas in demand right now is data science, because understanding the gamer and understanding our customers and how they behave inside of our game economies, as games move from what I call a premium model to more of a free-to-play model, where they're interacting and buying stuff inside the games themselves, understanding all of the economy and the player's journey through the game, and looking at all the data around that, and then understanding how to make decisions on when to release content, how to release content, how to speak to a given player and segment the players into various different cohorts, and then speak to those players, and those fans in different ways depending on their behaviors, is certainly something that all game companies are focused on, and I think that will start trickling down into esports as well. And so data science is a big area in gaming more broadly.
Do you find that many of your colleagues are gamers, or is that not a prerequisite for success at a company like Activision Blizzard?
So yeah, I mean, a lot of people at Activision and Blizzard are very, very passionate about games. I mean, I think it attracts, a company like ours attracts the hardcore gamers who not only play a lot of games but want to make it into their career because it's their passion. That doesn't mean that it's a prerequisite for success. There's plenty of people at the company who aren't gamers, but or not hardcore gamers, but they appreciate the growth that's happening in the industry. And there's plenty of roles for people like that at the company too. You don't have to be fluent in the game to do a great job at your role. And obviously we are a Fortune 500 company, so we have roles like finance, and investor relations and human resources and things like that, which you don't necessarily, maybe to be a game designer, you have to understand the game in a unique way, but in roles like that, you definitely don't need to be fluent in the games and how they work.
Great. So one more question for me, and then we'll turn to questions that are starting to pop up from across the chat. But the whole world's different now. I mean, we would have loved to have you come to visit us on campus right now, but even we can't go to campus in many cases right now. So how has COVID affected the esports world? Has there been any big changes or reactions to the changed dynamics of everyday life?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm glad you asked. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. COVID, in some ways, has disrupted the esports and specifically Activision Blizzard in a negative way. 2020 was going to be the year where Activision Blizzard Esports was going to have events in cities all over the US and all over the world. And we were going to showcase the model that we believe in, which is a city-based esports, that you could, fill stadiums and fill, ballrooms, all over the country with fans at these esports events and create this positive, amazing fan experience live and in person, just like traditional sports, if not even more energy and more excitement around these events. And so this was going to be the year where we're going to roll that out for the first time. Unfortunately, due to COVID, we've had to shelve those plans to do events in cities all over the world. Instead, though, and here's the beauty, we were able to pivot and stay online and stay on and have matches and not miss a beat. Like we were still able to broadcast all of our matches on YouTube, who is our exclusive distribution platform. And so while all the other sports, NBA, NCAA basketball, weren't able to, had to shut down for a period of time, we were the only sport able to be online because we're digital. We're a digital native virtual experience. And so the beauty of that is it allowed us to kind of showcase, the flexibility of esports as a digitally native sport. And as a result, we saw some increases in viewership as the season went on, and saw some ratings increase as well. I think some of the traditional sports are kind of suffering right now from some all-time lows in their ratings. And so I think it was a nice showcase of the beauty of esports during COVID. So it's a little bit of a double-edged sword. It's a bittersweet kind of time for the industry in that regard.
There was that experience early on in the lockdown where NASCAR, I think, was one of the first professional racing leagues to move over to to digital racing, which maybe only worked because so many of the racers were also hobbyist racing gamers. Not sure if it would work the same in other sports, or certainly wouldn't work from, a basketball player to Overwatch. Totally different sport, really, totally different event. Let's get to some of the questions that are coming up, because there's some really interesting ones to think about here. So one is just, do you think esports will ever be an Olympic sport? Are we moving in that direction?
Yes, I do. And I think we are moving in that direction. I think the IOC has expressed interest in esports. I know that there's been representatives, from various companies that have attended meetings with the Olympics in the past about esports. And I think there'll be a day in the future where the Olympics showcases esports and recognizes it as a global competitive sport, like all the other sports that they showcase.
And I think in that direction, what age do you think is the right age for people to start considering a career as an esports athletes? What have you observed? You mentioned it's on the younger end that people sort of reach their athletic peak in esports.
Yeah. So in order to be part of our professional esports leagues, the Overwatch League and the Call of Duty League, you need to be 18 years old. It's just a rule that we have as part of our programs. It doesn't mean you can't start practicing and getting ready much earlier than that. And so, but that's kind of when you can turn pro, if you will, to be part of our official pro competitions.
Have you gotten questions, or do you interact a lot with parents groups, for instance, around development of younger players?
I don't personally. I believe there are people, in the industry that are, and there are, I think that the interesting thing I think that's happening, and there's startups in the space that have interesting models to develop esports in high school, and to make it part of a formal program in high schools all over the country. And so I think those, as you start seeing, I think we started with the top of the pyramid at Activision Blizzard, the elite pro level competition. I think you need to start there to create aspiration. But now that we've kind of solidified that, we believe in starting from the bottoms up again, and investing in building esports programs in high schools and colleges, to create, to kind of really build that up. So that you have people playing the game at a high level, and who are training, throughout their young lives to perhaps, have a career in this one day as a pro player.
We have a couple of technology related questions. So we're on the cusp of some new console releases. What role do these evolving technologies, especially sort of new consoles like the ones we're seeing now, play in esports?
So I think the platform by which the game's played is a very important part of multiplayer gaming. And I don't know that there's going to be a big impact in esports, but I think one of the platform shifts that will play a big role, that will start to play a big role, is mobile. Mobile is the fastest growing segment in the gaming space today. Mobile, I don't even know the latest numbers around the amount of mobile devices that are out there, but it's a huge industry. It's the fastest growing industry. It's bigger than the console gaming industry at this point. And I think we're starting to think about, like, what's the future of mobile esports? And we have a game, Call of Duty, which has been around for 15 plus years. And we've recently, in last year, launched Call of Duty, a very successful version of Call of Duty on the mobile platform. And that could potentially be a big opportunity for esports as well. So that's one of the kind of the shifts that could evolve in the esports space is around mobile esports, and how that evolves.
Well, that relates to the second technology question in the queue about looking towards VR. And I guess we would include things like AR, augmented reality, and extended reality. If we're mobile, then we could be running around interacting with the world while we're interacting with esports. So those are really two different things: the augmented reality games and the virtual reality worlds. What's Activision Blizzard thinking about in that space?
Yeah, so a lot of excitement happening in both those industries. I don't claim to be the expert in either, but I do know that that while there is a lot of excitement around those industries, we typically look to once those platforms are at scale, because we're at the end of the day, Activision Blizzard makes the software, we make the content, and we're a little bit agnostic into where that content goes. And so we love the idea that that these VR platforms and headsets will proliferate over time and gain mass adoption and install base. And when they do, we're going to make great content for those platforms. And I think that's kind of where we sit in the industry as the content owner, where we can have flexibility and be a little bit platform agnostic in that sense. And so I think, but we are excited about the future of VR and AR, and we think gaming will be the first big use case where those industries gain mass adoption. There's other industries as well, like healthcare and others, where VR and AR might make even a bigger impact socially on our world. And so it's not just the gaming space. A lot of people like to associate VR and AR with just gaming, but there's a lot of use cases and end user applications for that technology as well.
Absolutely. Somebody would like us to circle back a little bit and just think out loud a little bit about the pros and cons of all women's esports teams, which is one of the examples you brought up when talking about gender equity. So the questioner says, on the one hand, I think they can help provide representation and inspire younger female gamers. On the other hand, is there a risk of increasing the divide between men and women in the space?
Yeah, it's a great point, and those are thoughtful. Those are things that I think need to balance going forward as we think about the future of esports. There's something to be said about having one team that has both male and female representatives, and it becomes about the skill and the talent, and it doesn't matter if you're a male or a female. And so I think both approaches can work, and I think in the early days of making a statement, I did like those news releases about the all women rosters, and I think those are the things that the industry needs right now. But over time, as we evolve, I do agree that we might not need that, and it might create more of a divide, and we have to get away from that.
You're right. And pushing beyond, I mean, I think there's a sense, especially in sport, of talking about first. So the first women, the first all-female roster. At some point, we just want to have a conversation about women as best or as just equal.
Exactly.
It's not. The question isn't, is this a female gamer? It's just a gamer. I think
Exactly.
would be the goal. That is, by the way, is one of the areas I think colleges could play a potentially very big role with different kinds of people involved, both in the study and in recruitment and in development. I hope this is a space colleges can really contribute to. Back to some of the questions about other business aspects. So this is a very specific question. How come the Overwatch League decided to create teams branded with cities rather than have teams like Liquid and Cloud9? I don't actually personally understand the difference, so you might explain the difference a little bit. And has the decision that the Overwatch League decided to make with city-focused teams had positive effects?
It's a great question. So the original thesis around creating the Overwatch League as a city-based league is, when we study traditional sports and the way that traditional sports have grown their fan bases over time, it has been through city allegiances. There's a reason why I'm a New York Yankees fan. I'm from New York. There's a reason why I love all Michigan sports. I went to Michigan. I have connection beyond just liking esports, but to a city. And we thought that esports, in its early infancy, was missing that ability to care about a given team. How do I know if I should like, Team Envy or Team Liquid or Cloud9? If I'm more a casual fan and I live in New York and I'm really interested in gaming, if there's a new New York team coming to town and there's a cool event happening and I want to be a part of it so I don't miss out on this big event coming to New York, then perhaps I jump in and become a new fan of that team because of the city-based allegiances. So that was the underlying original thesis. I think the jury's still out on if that was the right decision and if it's going to work over time. We have seen some initial data that suggested it is, and there's some data that goes against it. And I think we're still trying to kind of figure out if that's the model that's going to work long term in esports. But I do think there is some merit to that original thesis around city-based esports. There's also a very established brands like Liquid and others that have already big fan bases, and so perhaps we've sacrificed missing out on that by having them rebrand into city-based teams. And so I know there's a tough kind of pros and cons that we weighed there, and ultimately decided to go with the new novel approach towards esports that no one else had done before, which is a city-based model.
Well, I mean, that the affiliation model of geography makes a lot of sense, right? I mean, it is how we sort of form a lot of our associations. There's a question here that I think is related to this, but I'm going to expand the question a little bit. The question is about whether there are recruitment teams at Activision Blizzard that travel across the country to recruit up and coming players. Now that if you have a league with city teams, is there a process for identifying talent, for drafting talent, and so forth?
Yeah, so because of our city-based and our franchise model, a lot of the player-related stuff is now handled by our team. So we basically have a franchise model where Activision Blizzard owns the league. We have a relationship with our teams. Our teams are responsible for paying players, recruiting players, staffing up their players, and then putting good product on the field, if you will. And we're responsible for the business aspects of the league and working with the teams on how many matches they're going to be, what's the format of the league going to look like, where are the matches going to happen, and organizing the competition and then commercializing the competition, deciding where it's going to be distributed, who our sponsors are going to be, all that. The league does all of that stuff, while the teams are responsible for the scouting and the player development efforts. So, and we do have a system, an amateur system, we call it the Path to Pro, that we run and own and operate, where our teams have the opportunity to have academy teams, basically academy teams, where it's almost like the NBA, has the G League, and each team, there's teams that are affiliated with certain G League teams, and they could sign players, that are in the amateurs. So we are building that kind of amateur ecosystem as well for teams to be able to scout for players. We also have great data. And back to the question on data science, we have unbelievable amounts of data around who plays the game very well, who's the best in the world, who's the best at these certain metrics, who's the best, and so we provide some of that to our teams that helps them in their scouting decisions for players as well.
So we did have a question about whether you see a future role at the company for studying athletes themselves during performance. It sounds like that role exists.
Yeah, for sure. And it might exist in the team organization. So now it's not just Activision Blizzard, but, it's the San Francisco Shock, and it's the Toronto Defiant, and it's, the Atlanta FaZe, and all these other teams that are now associated with our leagues. As we're building this ecosystem, it's not just, part of it is, I think it's going to create a lot more opportunities for careers in esports, because, there might be brands that are sponsors of the league that want to understand what's the best way to sponsor, what's the best way to get involved in esports. And so those brands that are looking to market themselves to esports fans are going to need people that understand esports. We have a media partnership with Google, and YouTube distributes all of our matches. There's people at Google that are going to need to understand, which content they want to put on their platform. And so we're starting to create an ecosystem where those jobs don't just exist at Activision Blizzard, but our team organizations, our sponsors, our media partners, and all the different players that are rowing in the same direction to make this into an industry that's sustainable over time.
Somebody's looking for your advice on how to get into the managerial aspect of esports. If that's an interest, what would you recommend people do while they're in college?
Yeah, so I think there's a number of ways to do that, but I think I started my career as an investment banker, where I was part of the Ross Business School at the University of Michigan. I studied finance and accounting. I then went through a rigorous investment banking training program where I learned about business in general and finance. And then I had the luxury of then deciding like which industries I wanted to gravitate towards, because I had that basic training of business skills. And so I think it's for a managerial role in esports, it's a little bit more about what function I think you're most interested in, whether that's marketing, whether that's finance, whether that's accounting, or whatever it may be, broadcasting, and getting some good training in that broad function first. And it can be at a gaming company, or it could be at a service provider or any other company. And then obviously just knowing the industry really well, following it, expressing passion for it. I think, well, then if you do the function well and you're an expert in your field, there'll be a place, I think, for a gaming company or an esports organization to be interested in you for the technical skills that you could bring to the table. And it might not even need to be that you know so much about esports, but it might be that you know so much about data science and the esports company just needs a data scientist. And so I think it's, I think that's kind of I'd say the broad-based business skills are very important.
So really, no matter what area you're interested in, try to become good generally in that area. It applies equally well here. How about in, our School of Kinesiology has a big focus in athletic training. Do you see a similarly sized market eventually for esports trainers as there are for traditional physical sports trainers?
I think so. I think it's still early. And obviously all of this stuff relies on us doing our jobs well and making this into a big industry. Because if it does, then you'll start to see all of this stuff happen. It's still early days. And so, I think there's a lot of work to do to get to a place where there's a big enough, pool that's required, that's needed to be specialists around, that stuff. And so I say that across the board.
Another question here that actually may be related to equity in a roundabout way, but we still have fairly uneven access to broadband in the country. The companies like Activision Blizzard take a role in expanding that kind of access in order to help grow player bases and fan bases.
Can you repeat the question? Sorry, I didn't.
I'm thinking of, so particularly in rural parts of the US, there's very poor broadband. And it's that clearly good network access and good technology access is a key to participating in this event, either as a player or as a fan. Is that a thing that the companies are interested in? Is there anyone working on that?
Yeah, no, I think obviously it's very important to have high-speed internet in order to play in competitively, and then even as the viewership experience as it gets more dynamic and as these games get more powerful. I think it's gonna be incredibly important. I can't speak to the details honestly about. I'm not an expert in that area, so I don't know. I know that there's a lot of efforts underway across the broader technology and media landscape in working with broadband providers to provide kind of equal access and all of that. And there's a lot of initiatives. I'm not the expert in that space to speak to it specifically, but anyway.
I mean, I imagine companies like Activision Blizzard get involved in the net neutrality conversation.
Net neutrality, yeah. Exactly, yeah.
Absolutely. We're coming to the end of our time. I'm going to put you on the spot with a question here. What games do you like to play?
So I play a lot of the Activision Blizzard games. Overwatch, Call of Duty are two of my favorites. I also like all the sports games. So even I shouldn't be saying this as a representative of Activision Blizzard, but some of our competitors' games like EA Sports, all the Madden titles and FIFA, I really enjoy playing as well. And then I like mobile. I like mobile games, more the casual mobile games, the match threes, the puzzle games, the bubble shooter type games when I need to pass the time. Those mobile games are really fun.
And finally, what are the things that you're hoping we do here at the University of Michigan to boost our engagement with the esports world?
Yeah, so I think first and foremost, I think, academics and, I think getting more involved and leaning in to esports as a academic curriculum area and the things that relate to esports, I think is first and foremost. I think that's very important, and I would love to see the university doing more there. Obviously, I think as it grows as well, I'd love to see the University of Michigan have a varsity esports programs and all of the games that matter, and bring home national championships to the university.
Well, I think we've come to the end of our hour, and the sun is setting there in LA.
Yeah,
so.
exactly.
Jason, thank you so much for your time today. I look forward to seeing the many ways that this university can continue to engage with the world of esports, and to, of course, continue to engage with you and Activision Blizzard. For everyone watching, thank you for tuning in, and thank you for your questions. I'm sorry we couldn't get to all of them. There are a lot of really interesting questions going on, and we'll take a look at the boards too, and enjoy seeing those. If you enjoyed this talk, follow us on social media. On Twitter, we are @UMSI. You can visit si.umich.edu for links to our Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn accounts. Thanks, everybody, and play on.
Thank you, everyone.